When a technology company launches a new product, a new service, a new solution, that actually hits the nail on the head and it addresses a priority need the market needs, you can often see those companies rise significantly. Their revenues and their market expansion is fast. You may see unicorn companies that have launched their product or their solution and they rise very rapidly, achieving stellar performance, stellar revenues. Now, these organizations will be making bold promises, and in order to differentiate between those bold promises that are commercially viable and hype, Gartner created what we know as the hype cycle. Now, I really value this because it actually allows buyers to actually track and make decisions on whether they should be tracking and investing in those technologies or not. What the hype cycle is actually doing is it's comparing where those technologies are in a particular, in their particular growth compared to what the analysts think. And the value is that you're getting this comparison that is allowing buyers to actually make decisions, far more informed decisions. So this is Gartner's hype cycle. And like I say, I really value it. I think it's an incredibly valuable piece of work. And they have different hype cycles for different technologies. So what you have is the innovation trigger, whatever that may be. So you may be looking at a particular part of the tech industry related to information, Internet of Things, or AI, or machine learning, or deep learning. And what they do, every year they will actually say that particular technology is somewhere on this curve. Now this curve is, you've got expectations, it's rising, and the expectations are being built in the marketplace. It will plateau at some point. That's what they call the peak of inflated expectations, and then it will come down this slope into this rather this area that I would certainly aim to keep away from, called the trough of disillusionment. i.e. you've got what has actually, the expectations have actually been set to the disillusioned buyers, sellers, etc. And then it rises up again through this slope that they call slope of enlightenment, and it starts to rise slowly into the plateau of productivity. The key here is, as you rise up here, it's not to say that the technology companies are actually misrepresenting what they're selling. On the contrary, what they're actually doing is saying this is what's possible, but they're focusing on the features, the benefits, the technology. As a buyer, you need to actually differentiate between those salespeople who are actually selling the technology that could take you up here by what is possible, and certainly is possible with that technology, to those who are actually selling the solution and understanding, matching that technology to your business needs. And what that will do is it will ratchet this down to somewhere around about here, wherever that might be. So it's more in line with what you actually need. So that's the line as it's slowly rising up here, which is the productivity. You want to make sure that the expectations that are being set are not too high from where you're actually going. And that is an important part for the seller's perspective of solution sales. It requires them to actually dig deep, build those strong business relationships, to understand through conversation with buyers, the different people in the buying process, what their requirements actually are. We'll come back to that in a moment. But shall we say we're up here, Gartner have then this slope coming down, and it goes down into this trough. This trough they call the trough of disillusionment. It's kind of not a great place to be, because if you're down here and you had been up here, you're going to be disillusioned, and that's the whole concept of it. The technology is being sold out of context to what you actually require. And that is a skill of a salesperson, to make sure that you're mapping those two. It's a highly valued skill. If you're down here as a buyer, or even a sales organization with managing those situations, that's a real challenge. What you'll then do is you have to move up the slope of enlightenment, eventually getting to what Gartner called the plateau of productivity. Now, Gartner's saying that all technology is running that way, and I do agree, because there's a certain amount of sales about what the technology can achieve, and then there's inflated expectations. People are making assumptions, and you've got this drop into the trough of disillusionment. What I believe what we need to do, and the reason I like this graph so much is because it allows us to put in perspective what good solution salesmanship is all about. Let's say it's up here. The key is actually to take the line straight down to there. That slope, you have to make sure that slope is curving across the top. In other words, you're riding across the top of the wave to the plateau of productivity. You want to avoid taking your buyers into, and your customers and your clients into this. Now, the other aspect of it is, reality is if you're selling technology, you're going to be up here. That's understandable. But ratchet it down. The key is, from a sales perspective, and the sales teams, is to make sure that what is actually being sold, the expectations that are actually being set, are more in line with what is actually required. This line here, and I've intentionally used a lighter pen. Now, if you do that, then the management of those expectations are in line with what is actually required, and that requires the sales executives, the solution sales teams, and the leaders to actually discover what buyers actually require and what the selling organization requires. That in itself is a skill. It requires both sellers and buyers dropping into the conversations and looking intently at those conversations that are taking place. From a seller's perspective, are the right conversations taking place to discover those needs, the buyer's needs? From a buyer's perspective, are you talking to organizations who have those skilled salespeople that can actually help you ratchet that down to what is a realistic requirement? In other words, yes, the technology can do this, but this is what we need. This is what the technology can do for us. And that's in line with where you want it to go, how you actually want to deploy that technology within your organization and then beyond. That in itself requires us to go into the conversations. Now, we've been doing a lot of work to help sales teams and selling organizations manage that process, the ability to skirt along top the trough of disillusionment, so that they're not taking their clients and their sales leads into this trough. They're keeping them out of this. Also, to ratchet this down so that it's more in line with their environment. Sure, technology can do this, but it's in line with their environment, and that is discovering those needs. And we call that the conversational solution sales scorecard. The conversational, because we're dropping into the conversations and we're guiding the sales teams on the type of conversations they need to be having to understand those needs. This tool can also be extremely valuable for buyers. And often we find that sellers and sales reps are sharing it with buyers, with those contacts and trusted relationships that they're working with, to say, this is where I'm going, this is where we're taking the conversation, this is the route we're taking, this is how we're discovering the information. And that navigation in itself is extremely valuable to the buyers, because again, there's increased confidence that they're not going to go down here, but they're going to skirt across this, and it's going to be in line with their actual business requirements and allow them to achieve that productivity as quickly as possible in time. If you're interested in what we've talked about, and especially from sellers' perspective, but also buyers, making sure that you're going across the trough of disillusionment, you're not taking your clients, your buyers into this trough, but you're ratcheting it down to what's realistic for your technology into their environment and skirting across the top, then there is a link included with this video. This guide is taking you through using the conversational solution sales scorecard, which is a sales prospecting tool. It's ensuring and it's guiding how you use that tool to go into conversations so that you can set the technology and align it to your client's business requirements. In other words, ratchet it down to what's realistic to their environment, not to say the technology cannot do that, but ratchet it down to their environment and skirt across this trough of disillusionment.